From the outside, Alexander Chen's life looked like a dream come true. His tech company, Future Innovations, had grown from a small startup in his garage to a $4.2 billion empire that was changing the world. At 45, he had everything money could buy: a beautiful house in the most exclusive neighborhood, 3 wonderful kids, and a wife who'd been his rock for 20 years. Every morning, he'd wake up at 5 a.m. in his luxurious California mansion, kiss his sleeping wife Rose on the forehead, and head to his home gym. The house staff would already be preparing for the day, the smell of fresh coffee filling the air. His kids' academic and sports trophies lined the hallways, telling the story of a perfect family. But lately, something had changed. The weight of running a global company was getting heavier. Board meetings were getting longer, competitors were getting stronger, and the pressure to innovate was endless. Alex found himself staying at the office later and later, missing family dinners more often. The perfect image he built was starting to show tiny cracks, though nobody could see them yet. His wife noticed the changes first. The way he'd check his phone constantly during their rare date nights. How he seemed distant during family weekend brunches, his mind clearly somewhere else. When she'd ask what was wrong, he'd smile that charming smile of his and say, "Just some work stuff, honey, nothing to worry about." Then came the Tokyo trip. It was supposed to be a routine business visit, meeting investors, checking on their new Asian headquarters, the usual CEO stuff. That's where he first really noticed Jennifer Lee, his VP of International Relations. She was brilliant, ambitious, and 20 years his junior. During late-night meetings, going over presentations and contracts, something sparked between them. It started innocently enough: working dinners that ran late into the night, shared jokes about difficult clients, the excitement of closing big deals together. Jennifer understood the pressure he was under in a way few others could. She was there when he landed the biggest contract of his career, and their celebration hug lasted a few seconds too long. Back home, his perfect life continued on the surface. He'd attend his son's basketball games when he could, help his younger daughter with her science projects if he had time, and try to keep up with his teenage daughter's rapidly changing world. But his mind would often drift to the messages on his secret second phone. The affair wasn't planned. It just happened. One late night in a Tokyo hotel bar turned into 6 months of stolen moments and business trips conveniently scheduled to the same cities. Alex told himself it wasn't really hurting anyone. Rose was busy with her charity work, the kids were wrapped up in their own lives, and he deserved something just for himself, didn't he? After all, he'd spent decades building this empire, sacrificing everything for his family's comfort. But the guilt was always there, eating away at him during family movie nights when his youngest would curl up next to him on the couch. It would hit him hard during breakfast when Rose would straighten his tie like she'd done for 20 years, looking at him with complete trust in her eyes. During video calls with Jennifer, he'd catch glimpses of family photos behind him, memories of happier, simpler times when his biggest worry was making payroll for his first 10 employees. His executive assistant, Mrs. Wu, who'd been with him since the startup days, started giving him concerned looks. She'd known him long enough to sense something was off. The way he'd rush through family calls, the mysterious gaps in his schedule, the slight tremor in his voice when Rose would unexpectedly drop by the office. The successful CEO who'd built his reputation on honesty and family values was now living a double life, and the stress was starting to show. His hands would shake slightly during board presentations. He'd zone out during important meetings, his mind torn between two worlds. The man who prided himself on being in control was slowly losing grip on everything he built. Even his closest friend and co-founder Thomas noticed the change. During their weekly tennis matches, Alex's game was off. He'd miss easy shots, seem distracted. "You okay, buddy?" Thomas would ask. "Just tired," Alex would reply, avoiding his friend's worried gaze. Deep down, he knew this couldn't last forever. Something had to give. But like many powerful men before him, he convinced himself he could manage it all: the company, the family, the affair. He was Alex Chen after all. The man who turned a garage startup into a billion-dollar company. The man who could solve any problem thrown his way. What he didn't realize was that his perfect life was balanced on a nice edge, and it would take just one small push, one tiny mistake, to send everything crashing down. That push was coming sooner than he thought, in the form of an anonymous email that would shatter not just his life, but the lives of everyone around him. It was a normal Tuesday morning when Alex Chen's world fell apart. He was in the middle of his morning coffee, scanning through emails on his phone, when his wife Rose burst into his home office. Her face was pale, hands shaking as she held her iPad. He'd never seen her like this in their 20 years of marriage. "How could you?" Her voice was barely a whisper, but it hit him like a thunderclap. On her screen were pictures, dozens of them. Him and Jennifer at various hotels, sharing intimate moments they thought were private. Receipts from restaurants, flight bookings, messages they'd exchanged. Someone had compiled everything, leaving no room for denial. The same email had gone to the board of directors, major news outlets, and even their children's phones. Within minutes, his oldest son Thomas stormed downstairs, his face a mask of disgust. His teenage daughter Linda slammed her bedroom door so hard the family photos rattled on the walls. His youngest Amy just stood at the top of the stairs, tears streaming down her face, looking at him like he was a stranger. "I can explain," Alex started, but the words felt hollow even to him. Rose, always the picture of grace under pressure, threw her iPad onto his desk. It clattered across the polished wood, scattering his perfectly arranged papers. "Explain what?" she asked, her lawyer's instincts kicking in. "The dates that match your business trips, the hotel rooms charged to your private card. Or maybe you'd like to explain the messages where you told her our marriage was just for show." The house staff quietly disappeared, leaving the family to their privacy. Outside, photographers were already gathering at the gates. News traveled fast in Silicon Valley, especially when it involved a tech billionaire's scandalous downfall. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages from board members, PR team, lawyers, friends. Everyone wanted answers. But the only people who mattered right now were in this house, and they were falling apart because of him. Thomas, his 17-year-old son, stepped forward. "Dad, my friends are sending me links to news articles. It's already online. Everyone at school will know." The boy's voice cracked, and Alex felt physical pain seeing his son's embarrassment and hurt. Linda appeared at the top of the stairs, now dressed for school. "I'm not going today," she announced, her usual confidence replaced by vulnerability. "Everyone's already texting me about it. I can't. I just can't face them." She was 15, at an age where social standing meant everything. Alex had just destroyed that too. Rose took a deep breath, straightening her shoulders like she used to do before entering a courtroom. "Kids, go to your rooms. I need to talk to your father." Her calm tone was scarier than any yelling could have been. As soon as the children left, Rose's composure cracked. 6 months, she said, scrolling through the evidence. 6 months of lies. Every business trip, every late night at the office, was any of it real? Was anything in our marriage real? Alex reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "Don't," she warned. "You don't get to comfort me, not anymore." She looked around their home office at the family photos on the walls. Vacations, graduations, anniversaries. 20 years of memories now tainted by doubt. His phone buzzed again. The board was calling an emergency meeting. His PR team was drafting statements. The company's stock was already dropping in pre-market trading, but none of that mattered compared to the sight of his wife packing a small bag. "Where are you going?" he asked, panic rising in his throat. "The kids and I are staying at my sister's house. I can't even look at you right now." She paused at the door. "The worst part, you had everything. A family that loved you. Children who looked up to you. Was it worth it?" Before he could answer, his assistant called. Jennifer had resigned via email and booked a flight to Singapore. She wasn't taking his calls. The woman he'd risked everything for had disappeared at the first sign of trouble. By noon, the story was everywhere. Business channels debated the impact on his company. Gossip sites posted old photos of him and Rose, analyzing when their marriage started showing cracks. His children's social media accounts were flooded with messages, forcing them to go private. The house felt enormous and empty. In the kitchen, breakfast sat untouched, a reminder of how quickly normalcy could shatter. His youngest daughter's cereal had turned soggy in its bowl. Linda's half-finished toast sat next to her AP history homework. Thomas's protein shake was still in the blender. Alex Chen, the man who could solve any business problem, who prided himself on controlling every situation, sat alone in his perfect house. The empire he'd built, the family he loved, the reputation he'd crafted, everything was crumbling. And for the first time in his life, his billions couldn't fix what he'd broken. Outside, reporters continued gathering. His phone kept buzzing. But inside the mansion's walls, the silence was deafening. On his desk, a family photo caught his eye. Last Christmas, everyone smiling, his arm around Rose. He picked it up, finally letting the tears fall. The perfect life he'd taken for granted was gone, destroyed not by any external force, but by his own choices. The next few weeks felt like watching a train wreck in slow motion. Alex Chen, once celebrated as a tech visionary, now couldn't turn on the TV without seeing his face splashed across the news. Every channel had a different angle on his downfall. Business networks analyzed the company's plummeting stock price, while entertainment shows dissected every photo of him and Jennifer they could find. His temporary office at the Four Seasons hotel suite had become his prison. Expensive, yes, but hollow. The minibar remained untouched. He needed a clear head to deal with the avalanche of crisis meetings. His suits hung pristine in the closet, each one reminding him of mornings when Rose would adjust his tie, their routine now just another memory. The board meeting had been brutal. People he'd worked with for years now couldn't meet his eyes. "We need you to take a leave of absence," the chairman had said, reading from a prepared statement. "The company's image, our partnerships, our future deals, everything's at risk." Alex didn't fight it. How could he? The stock had dropped 30% in 3 days. His phone, once constantly buzzing with business opportunities and friendly messages, now only lit up with calls from lawyers and crisis managers. Friends he'd known for decades suddenly became too busy to meet for their usual golf games. The charity organizations he supported quietly removed his name from their websites. It was as if the world was erasing him, pixel by pixel. But the worst pain came from his children's silence. Thomas had blocked his number after Alex tried calling for the 5th time in one day. Linda's social media posts showed she dyed her hair black and started dressing differently. Her way of dealing with the trauma, he guessed. Little Emmy, who used to send him funny cat videos every morning, hadn't sent a single message. Rose's lawyer, someone he played tennis with just months ago, served him divorce papers at the hotel. "She's asking for full custody," the man said, unable to hide his disappointment in his former friend. The papers detailed every trip, every lie, every moment he'd chosen his affair over his family. Seeing it all laid out in cold legal language made him feel physically sick. Jennifer was still nowhere to be found. Her resignation letter had been brief and formal, as if their relationship had been nothing more than a business arrangement. The Singapore address she'd left turned out to be fake. Even her social media accounts had vanished. The woman he'd risked everything for had disappeared like morning mist. One morning, he decided to drive past his old house just to feel close to his family. He saw Emmy getting into his sister-in-law's car for school. She looked smaller somehow, her shoulders hunched as if carrying an invisible weight. She glanced up, spotted his car, and quickly looked away. That hurt more than any media criticism or stock market plunge. The company announced an interim CEO the following week. Alex watched the press conference on his hotel room TV, seeing his replacement, his former deputy, promise to restore trust and integrity to the company. The message was clear. Alex Chen was now a liability to the empire he'd built from nothing. His mother called him one evening, her voice heavy with concern. "I raised you better than this," she said softly. "No judgment, just sadness. Your father would have been so disappointed." The words echoed in his head long after he hung up. Even simple things became complicated. Going to his favorite restaurants meant facing whispers and stares. His regular barber of 10 years suddenly couldn't fit him into the schedule. The private school where his children studied sent a polite but firm email asking him to stay away from campus events for the time being. The divorce proceedings moved quickly. Rose, ever practical, wanted it over with. She didn't fight him on money. She never cared about that. But she wanted distance, a clean break. Their morning coffee talks, weekend farmers market visits, family game nights, all of it now belonged to a past life that seemed more like a dream. One day, scrolling through his phone's photos, he found a video from last Christmas. The family was decorating the tree, everyone laughing as Amy tried to reach the top branch. Rose was filming, her laugh behind the camera making it shake slightly. Thomas was helping Linda hang ornaments, their usual sibling bickering paused for the holiday spirit. Alex watched it on repeat, remembering how perfect that moment had been, never imagining he could lose it all. His hotel room, despite its luxury, felt colder each night. The king-sized bed was too big for one person. Room service meals for one arrived on elegant trays, but tasted like cardboard. The housekeeping staff treated him kindly, almost pitying him, the fallen billionaire living out of a hotel suite while his life crumbled around him. Looking out his hotel window at the city lights, Alex realized money couldn't buy back trust. His billions couldn't erase the hurt in his children's eyes. His success couldn't rebuild his marriage. Everything he'd spent decades building, his company, his reputation, his family, had slipped through his fingers like sand. And the worst part was knowing that he had no one to blame but himself. The state championship basketball game was starting in 20 minutes, and Alex Chen sat alone in his hotel room, staring at the ticket in his hand. Thomas was playing tonight, his last high school game. The son who'd once begged him to practice layups every weekend now didn't even want him there. He'd tried to go anyway. Drove to the gym, parked his car, even walked to the entrance. But Rose's text was clear. Please don't come in. He doesn't want you here. Don't make this night about you. He sat in his car for 10 minutes, watching families stream into the gymnasium. Parents wearing team colors, carrying signs full of excitement. Everything he should have been doing. Back in his hotel suite, he poured himself a drink and walked out to the balcony. 40 floors up, the city lights sparkled below like fallen stars. From this height, everything looked small, manageable. But up close, his life was in pieces. His phone buzzed, a news alert. His replacement as CEO had just announced a major new partnership. The company's stock jumped 5% in after-hours trading. The message was clear. They were better off without him. The empire he'd built was moving on, leaving him behind. Standing on that balcony, glass in hand, Alex felt a dangerous pull from the city below. How easy it would be to just lean forward. Let gravity solve all his problems. The thought terrified him, but it wouldn't go away. His hands shook as he gripped the railing. Then his phone rang. Not a lawyer or crisis manager this time, but his mother. Her voice, warm and familiar, cut through his dark thoughts. "I made your favorite soup," she said, as if he was still a little boy. "Come over tomorrow." No excuses. He tried to protest, but she wouldn't hear it. "You've made mistakes, terrible ones. But you're still my son, and you're not going to fix anything standing alone in that hotel room." The next day, sitting in his mother's kitchen, the smell of childhood memories all around him, something broke inside Alex. "I've lost everything, Mom," he whispered, his voice cracking. "The company, Rose, the kids. I don't know who I am without them." His mother, her hair more gray than he remembered, took his hand. "Then it's time to find out. Not for the company, not for Rose, not even for the kids. For yourself." That evening, after a long talk with his mother, Alex made 2 calls. The first was to a therapist recommended by his family doctor. The second was to a private rehabilitation center known for helping executives deal with personal crisis. The center was nothing like he expected. No marble floors or luxury suites. Just simple rooms, peaceful gardens, and people like him, successful on paper, broken inside. His room had a single bed, a desk, and a window overlooking a small pond. For the first time in decades, he had nowhere to hide behind his wealth or status. The first week was the hardest. No phone, no internet, no business calls. Just therapy sessions, group meetings, and long walks around the grounds. His therapist, Dr. Chen, no relation, didn't let him hide behind excuses about work pressure or midlife crisis. "Why did you really do it?" she asked in one session, her quiet voice cutting through his practiced explanations. "Not what you tell yourself, but the real reason." Hours turned into days, days into weeks. Alex started keeping a journal, filling pages with thoughts he'd never dared to face before. How he'd grown up poor, watching his parents struggle. How he'd promised himself his family would never want for anything. Somewhere along the way, providing everything had become a substitute for being present. In group therapy, he met other successful people who'd lost their way. A surgeon who'd become addicted to pills. A judge who'd compromised his ethics. A startup founder who'd missed her daughter's entire childhood chasing unicorn status. Their stories were different, but the core was the same. The pursuit of success had cost them everything that mattered. One night, unable to sleep, Alex started writing letters to his children. Not asking for forgiveness, just sharing memories. Teaching Thomas to ride a bike. Building pillow forts with Linda. Reading bedtime stories to Emmy. He didn't send the letters. They weren't ready to hear from him yet. But writing them helped him remember who he used to be before power and money changed him. The center's therapist suggested he start a journal of gratitude. Each morning, he had to write down 3 things he was thankful for. At first, it seemed impossible. What was left to be grateful for? But slowly, he started noticing small things. The way sunlight hit the pond in the morning. The taste of simple, unrushed meals. The sound of birds outside his window. During a meditation session, Alex had a realization that brought him to tears. He'd spent his life building walls to protect himself from ever being poor or powerless again. But those same walls had kept out love, authenticity, and real connection. His affair wasn't about desire, it was about feeling something, anything, through the numbness of his perfect, controlled life. 2 months into his stay, Alex received news that his company's board had officially appointed a permanent replacement. Surprisingly, it didn't hurt as much as he expected. Sitting by the pond that evening, watching ducks glide across the water, he realized something. For the first time in his adult life, he wasn't thinking about the next deal, the next quarter, the next achievement. He was just present. His therapist noticed the change too. "You're starting to look people in the eye when you talk," she said, "not to convince them or control them, but to really see them." It was a small thing, but it marked the beginning of something new. The mighty Alex Chen was learning to be human again. 1 year after the scandal broke, Alex Chen's life looked completely different. Gone was the penthouse office with its floor-to-ceiling windows. Instead, he worked from a modest space in a co-working center, surrounded by young entrepreneurs who were too busy with their own dreams to care about his past. His new project wasn't about making billions or disrupting industries. He'd started a foundation focusing on mental health support for business leaders and their families. The idea had come to him during his last week at the rehabilitation center, listening to another exec talk about missing his daughter's entire childhood. "We're taught how to read balance sheets," Alex told his small team during their first meeting. "But nobody teaches us how to balance our lives." His staff was tiny, just 4 people who believed in second chances. No corner offices, no executive perks, just a shared mission to help others avoid his mistakes. The hardest part was writing the foundation's story for their website. He had to be honest about his own failures. Every word felt like ripping off a bandage, exposing his wounds to the world. But his therapist had taught him that real healing starts with truth. "My name is Alex Chen," the page began. "I had everything, a loving family, a successful company, respect in my community. I lost it all because I forgot what really mattered. This foundation exists because I learned my lessons the hard way, so others don't have to." His mother visited his new office one day, bringing homemade lunch like she used to when he was starting his first company. She looked around the simple space, so different from his old corporate kingdom. "You seem more at peace here," she said, and for the first time, she was right. The foundation's first project was a series of anonymous support groups for executives. No names, no companies, no networking, just honest conversations about the price of success. Alex attended every session, not as a leader but as a participant. He shared his story, listening as others shared theirs. Stories of missed birthdays, broken marriages, children who'd become strangers. One evening, after a particularly emotional session, a young CEO pulled him aside. "I was about to start an affair with my assistant," he confessed. "Hearing your story made me realize where that road leads. I'm getting counseling instead." It was the first time Alex felt his pain might serve a purpose. His relationship with his children was still fragile. Thomas, now in college, had agreed to monthly phone calls. They were awkward at first, filled with long silences and safe topics like weather and sports. But slowly, something real started emerging. During one call, Thomas mentioned struggling with the pressure of being a student athlete. For the first time, Alex didn't offer solutions, he just listened. Linda's healing took a different path. She'd started seeing the therapist Alex's foundation recommended for teens dealing with family trauma. One day, she sent him a short text. "My therapist says you're trying to change. Are you?" It opened the door to a careful exchange of messages, each one a tiny bridge across the chasm he'd created. Little Amy, now not so little, was the hardest. She'd stopped calling him Dad, addressing him as Alex in the few messages she sent. Each time he saw her name on his phone, his heart would race, hoping for a sign of forgiveness but grateful for any contact at all. Rose had moved on, dating a kind-looking history professor. It hurt, but Alex forced himself to be happy for her. During one of their necessary meetings about the children's trust funds, she noticed the changes in him. "You seem different," she said, "more real." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. The business world hadn't forgotten him, but the story had evolved. Industry blogs that once mocked his downfall now wrote about his foundation's work. A few former board members even quietly reached out, impressed by his transformation. He turned down their offers to invest in new ventures. "I'm not that person anymore," he'd tell them. His old assistant, Mrs. Wu, came to visit him one day. She'd retired from the company but wanted to see how he was doing. Looking around his modest office, she smiled. "You know what's different," she said. "Your eyes. They're not racing to the next moment anymore." The foundation grew slowly but meaningfully. They started a scholarship program for children of executives with one condition: the parents had to attend family therapy sessions. Alex would share his story at these sessions, not as a cautionary tale, but as proof that change was possible. Some nights, alone in his small apartment, he'd never gone back to the hotel. Alex would look at old family photos. The pain was still there, but it had changed. Instead of the crushing guilt that used to drive him to the edge of that balcony, he felt a quiet determination to earn back what he'd lost, even if it took the rest of his life. His therapist had asked him once what success looked like now. The old Alex would have talked about money, power, or status. The new Alex had a different answer. "Success is when my kids feel proud to tell people I'm their father again. Everything else is just details." 1 year after hitting rock bottom, Alex Chen wasn't a billionaire anymore. His name didn't appear on magazine covers or industry rankings. But for the first time in his life, he was doing something that felt truly meaningful. He was using his biggest failures to help others avoid the same mistakes, and in doing so, he was slowly, painfully, beautifully finding his way back to himself. The call came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Alex was reviewing applications for his foundation's family therapy program when his phone lit up with Rose's number. His heart stopped. She never called unless it was absolutely necessary. "Linda's in the hospital," Rose said, her voice shaking. "She had a panic attack at school. A bad one. The doctors want to keep her for observation." The words hit him like physical blows. His teenage daughter, always so strong, so independent, had broken down in the middle of her chemistry class. His first instinct was to rush to the hospital, take control, fix everything. But the past year had taught him better. "What do you need?" he asked instead. "What does Linda need?" Rose's relief at his response was audible. "Just be available if she wants to talk. Don't push. Don't try to solve everything. Just be there." The next few days tested everything he'd learned about patience and putting others first. He wanted desperately to see Linda, but respected her space. He sent a simple text. "I'm here whenever you're ready. No pressure. Love you." To his surprise, Linda replied that evening. No words, just a heart emoji. It was tiny, but it was something. His therapist had taught him to appreciate these small victories. A week later, Linda agreed to see him. The hospital's family room was painted in calm blues and greens, with comfortable chairs and soft lighting. Linda looked smaller somehow, wrapped in her favorite oversized sweater. Dark circles under her eyes told stories of sleepless nights. "The doctors say I've been holding things in too long," she said, playing with the sleeve of her sweater. "Not just what happened with you and Mom. Everything. Always trying to be perfect, never wanting to disappoint anyone." Alex's heart ached. How had he not seen it? His own drive for perfection had infected his children, creating invisible pressures they couldn't handle. "I'm sorry," he said softly, "not just for what I did to our family. I'm sorry for teaching you that anything less than perfect wasn't good enough." Linda looked up, surprised by his words. "Mom says you've changed, that you're doing good things with your foundation now." They talked for an hour, really talked, maybe for the first time ever. Linda shared her fears about college, about relationships, about trusting people. Alex mostly listened, fighting his old urge to jump in with solutions. As Linda's health improved, their conversations continued. She started seeing a therapist regularly, and Alex made sure she knew it was strength, not weakness, to ask for help. Sometimes they'd just sit in the hospital garden, sharing comfortable silence. Thomas, away at college, called more often after hearing about his sister. Their conversations grew beyond the usual safe topics. One night, he opened up about the pressure he felt as the oldest to hold everything together after the scandal. "I wanted to hate you," Thomas admitted during one late-night call. "It was easier than being scared about what was happening to our family." Little Amy started sending him pictures again, drawings she made in art class, her new pet hamster, funny faces she made with her friends. Each one came with a short message, slowly moving from Alex back to Dad. Rose noticed the changes too. During a parent-teacher conference for Amy, she actually sat next to him instead of maintaining their usual careful distance. Afterward, over coffee, she said something that moved him deeply. "You're becoming the father they always needed." His foundation work took on new meaning. He started a special program for teenagers dealing with family crises inspired by Linda's experience. The support groups now included sessions for children of executives, giving them a safe space to talk about the unique pressures they faced. One evening, Linda visited his office after her therapy session. Looking at the wall of thank you letters from families his foundation had helped, she said something that brought tears to his eyes. "Maybe something good came from all the bad stuff. You're helping other families not break like ours did." The healing wasn't always smooth. There were still hard days, missed connections, old hurts that would surface unexpectedly. During one family therapy session, Amy broke down crying, asking why he couldn't have loved them enough to stay faithful. Those moments felt like starting over from zero. But there were good days too. Thomas invited him to a college baseball game. Linda asked for his advice about a school project. Amy sent him a Father's Day card, her first in 2 years. The foundation office became a family space too. Linda would sometimes do her homework there after therapy sessions. Thomas would stop by during college breaks to help with the youth program. Even Amy started coming by after school, curling up on the office couch with her books. One day, his therapist asked what felt different now. Alex thought about it carefully. "Before, I tried to buy their love with things, expensive gifts, fancy trips, always saying yes to whatever they wanted. Now I'm trying to earn their trust with something money can't buy, being genuinely present." Rose started dating a kind history professor, and Alex found he could be happy for her. During Amy's school play, they sat in the same row, no longer needing 3 empty seats between them. They weren't friends, but they were learning to be good co-parents. The biggest test came when Linda was finally released from therapy. The hospital had become a safe space for their rebuilding relationship. Without it, would they lose momentum? But Linda surprised him. "Can we still talk?" she asked. "Maybe ice cream every Thursday like we used to." Alex Chen, who once measured success in billions, found himself crying over the simple prospect of weekly ice cream with his daughter. It wasn't a perfect Hollywood ending, but it was real. And real, he had learned, was better than perfect any day. 3 years had passed since the scandal that shattered the Chen family. On a bright spring morning, Alex stood in front of his mirror, adjusting his tie. Not for a board meeting or business presentation this time, but for Thomas's college graduation. His hands trembled slightly as he read the text message again. "Dad, we saved you a seat with the family." The campus was buzzing with excitement. Proud parents and eager graduates filled the air with chatter and laughter. Alex spotted Rose first, standing with her new husband Rick, the history professor who'd brought genuine warmth into her life. 3 years ago, this sight would have crushed him. Today, he felt grateful she'd found happiness again. Linda waved him over, her dark hair now streaked with purple, a change that the old Alex would have disapproved of, but that the new Alex recognized as part of her journey to find herself. She just finished her first year of college, choosing to study psychology, inspired partly by her own healing journey. "Dad, over here," Emmy called out. She'd grown so much in 3 years, no longer the hurt little girl who couldn't look him in the eye. Now 13, she had Rose's confidence and, surprisingly, his entrepreneurial spirit. She'd started a successful pet-sitting business in their neighborhood. As Alex took his seat among his family, he felt the weight of the moment. 3 years ago, he couldn't even attend Thomas's basketball games. Now here he was, sitting with his family, about to watch his firstborn graduate from college. The ceremony was beautiful, but Alex barely noticed the speeches. He was too busy watching his son on stage, remembering a lifetime of moments. Teaching Thomas to ride a bike, coaching his little league games, their first awkward conversation after the scandal, and the slow, careful rebuilding of trust over countless phone calls and coffee meetings. When Thomas's name was called, they all stood up cheering. Alex caught Rose's eye, and they shared a smile, not as husband and wife anymore, but as proud parents who'd learned to put their children first. Rick clapped just as enthusiastically, having become a genuine friend to Thomas over the past 2 years. After the ceremony, during the family photos, something unexpected happened. Thomas looked at the photographer, then at Alex standing awkwardly to the side. "Dad," he said, "get in here with us." The invitation felt like a gift he hadn't dared hope for. The photo session turned into an impromptu family gathering at a nearby restaurant. The conversation flowed naturally, years of tension melting away. Linda shared stories from her psychology classes, while Emmy entertained everyone with tales from her pet-sitting adventures. "Remember when we couldn't even be in the same room?" Linda mused, making everyone laugh with a kind of humor that only comes from healing. "Now look at us, we're actually having fun together." Rose's husband Rick raised his glass. "To the Chen family," he said, "not broken, just reorganized." The toast brought tears to Alex's eyes. This man who could have been an enemy had become an ally in helping the children heal. Later that afternoon, Thomas pulled Alex aside. "I've been thinking about joining your foundation," he said. "Maybe start a program for college athletes dealing with family issues. We could help a lot of people." Alex had to fight back tears. His son wasn't just accepting him, he wanted to work alongside him. "The foundation would be lucky to have you," he managed to say. That evening, sitting in his modest apartment, Alex looked at the new family photo on his phone. It wasn't the perfect family portrait from his billionaire days, everyone wearing coordinated outfits and perfect smiles. This was messier, more real. Linda's purple hair, Amy's braces, Thomas's graduation gown slightly crooked, Rose and Rick looking at each other with genuine affection, and Alex himself, older, humbler, but somehow more alive than he'd ever been in those polished corporate photos. His phone buzzed with a message from Linda. "Ice Cream Thursday still on for tomorrow." Their weekly tradition had survived 3 years, through tears, silence, and eventually laughter. "Wouldn't miss it," he replied. Another message popped up, this time from Emmy. "Dad, can you help me with my business plan this weekend? I want to expand the pet-sitting service." The old Alex would have thrown money at it. The new Alex knew better. She didn't need his money. She needed his time and experience. Rose had texted too. "The kids want to start a monthly family dinner tradition. Rick and I are happy to host. You're welcome to join." 3 years ago, this would have seemed impossible. His foundation work had evolved as well. What started as a way to atone for his mistakes had grown into something truly meaningful. They now had programs in 3 cities, helping hundreds of families navigate the challenges of success without losing themselves. The last message of the night came from Thomas. "Thanks for being there today, Dad. Not just at graduation, but for the past 3 years. I know it wasn't easy." Alex Chen, once known as the billionaire who lost everything, realized he'd gained something money could never buy. His family wasn't perfect anymore, but it was real. They'd learned to love each other not despite their flaws, but with full acceptance of them. Looking out his window at the city lights, Alex thought about how life had come full circle. 3 years ago, he'd stood on a hotel balcony, thinking he'd lost everything. Now he understood, sometimes you have to lose everything to find what really matters. His phone buzzed one last time. It was his mother. "Proud of you, son. Not for what you lost or gained, but for who you've become." Alex smiled, knowing that finally, after all these years, he was becoming someone worth being proud of.